Okay, welcome to our webinar, How to Use Rubrics in Blackboard. We are going to get started. The three of us are on here, and the three of us are myself, Wendy Tietz at Kent State University, Jennifer Canis at University of South Florida, and Tracy Miller-Nobles from Austin Community College. I'm going to be turning it over to Tracy now.
Great, thank you, Wendy. So today we're going to talk about how to use rubrics in the Blackboard Learning Management System. I use rubrics in my tax research course and also my individual tax course. But this is a tool that can be used in any course that has a significant grading component to it. The reason why I began using rubrics was because I had a lot of written assignments in these two courses that required a significant amount of time on my part. And so what I found was that if I created these rubrics in Blackboard, it decreased the amount of time that I spent grading, and it also provided quality feedback to the students so that they would be able to improve their writing as we progress through the course. So what we're going to do today is we're going to begin by discussing the different types of rubrics. I'm going to demonstrate how to plan a rubric, the different parts that you need to have in a rubric. Then I'm going to open up Blackboard and we're going to actually go in and create a rubric. And I'm going to show you how Blackboard does the grading aspect when you're using a rubric. So let's start by first talking about the types of rubrics that are available for you to use. So in general, there are two types of rubrics. We have an analytic rubric, and we also have a holistic rubric. In an analytic rubric, there is a separate score for each criterion. For example, you may have a score that you give to your students for their ideas. You may have a score for organization or the use of evidence. In a holistic rubric, on the other hand, you have one overall score that represents the overall reflection of the paper, your overall impression of the paper. So as an example, I found these two great examples of the different types of rubrics. This one is if you were grading someone who was providing you breakfast in bed. So this is an analytic rubric. You can see I have three different criteria. I have food, presentation, and comfort. And each of those criteria is going to get a different score. And the levels are from beginning to exemplary. Now, in a holistic rubric, on the other hand, I don't have those separate criteria. So instead, I have an overall holistic description of what a grade of a score of 4 would be, which would be the food is perfectly cooked, the presentation surpasses expectations, and you're kept incredibly comfortable throughout the meal. So you notice how the analytic rubric provides much more detail than the holistic rubric does, but gets to the overall same result. So the type of rubric that I use in my courses is I use this analytic rubric because I like to provide a different points for different criteria and also be able to assess different levels of those different criteria. So that's what I'm specifically going to be talking about today is the analytic rubric. Now, the other thing you have to decide when you're developing rubrics in Blackboard is you have to decide if you're going to do a generic rubric, which could be used for multiple assignments. So let's say you have a discussion board posting that your students do every week, and you want to use the same rubric for every discussion board posting, then that would be a generic rubric, and it would be very generic. You wouldn't tailor it to specific assignments. Or you could do a task-specific rubric, which is designed to fit a specific assignment, And this may be, this rubric may include very specific feedback related to that assignment. And I generally use more task-specific rubrics than I do generic rubrics. And the one I'm going to demonstrate for you today is going to be a task-specific rubric. And we're going to do that for this assignment. So we're going to go through the process of developing a rubric for this assignment, which is in my tax research case. So this is part of a project that the students have to do where they have to write a letter to a client about a company that is based on state and local nexuses. And so I have included the assignment in the Blackboard learning management system, and it says that they have to answer 5 specific questions. They have to write a letter, they have to answer 5 specific questions. Economic nexus based on total sales, economic nexus based on undiscounted total sales, economic nexus based on quantity, identifying which states you have sales tax obligations in, and then explaining the methods that you use to analyze the data. But in addition to that, I also want to grade them on a variety of other things. This is a letter, so I need to grade them not only on the correct answer, but I also want to grade them on things like format and spelling and grammar, overall clarity of the writing. And so that's the first thing that we do when we're developing a rubric is we identify exactly what you want to grade. And this will be the criteria that you want to grade. So I've decided that I want to grade my students on the format, spelling and grammar, restatement of facts, making sure they have the correct answer to questions 1 through 5, and overall clarity of their writing. So that's the first thing you have to do is you have to identify what do you want to grade your students on. Once you've identified what you want to grade your students on, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to identify the levels of achievement. So if you go back to thinking about that breakfast in bed example, there was a level of aptitude, and you have to decide how do you want your students to be identified by their level of aptitude. So you can do as many categories as you would like to. You could do novice, competent, proficient. You could do it by a letter grade, A, B, C, D, F. You could do it as does not meet, partially meets, meets, more than meets, and exceeds. You could do it as needs a complete rewrite, needs considerable revision, needs some revision. Excellent. So you just have to identify what is the level of achievement that you want on that rubric. And then once you've identified that, now you've set up your criteria, you've set up the levels of achievement that you're going to have on your rubric. And then the third step is that you have to decide on the points or the percentages for each category. And in Blackboard, you can either use points or you can use percentages. So this assignment is going to be worth 30 points. And so I want the majority of the grade to be based on getting the correct answer by the students. So I decided that I'm going to have the answers to questions 1 through 5 be worth 20 points of their overall score. Then I'm going to assign 4 points to the clarity of their writing, and then 2 points each to format, spelling and grammar, and restatement of facts. So once I've decided how the points are going to be allocated, then what I do is on a piece of paper, I just quickly apply the points to the different levels of achievement. So you'll see over here on the left-hand side, these are my criteria that I've set up. Here, my format, my 5 different questions, and then overall clarity. Then across the top of the rubric, these are my levels of achievement. So I chose to use does not meet through exceeds. And then you'll notice that I put my points in so that if a student was to qualify in the exceeds category for everything, they would add up to a full perfect score. Also, I wanted to be able to give the students the ability to get a 0, so I had a does not meet category, and I just put zeros in all of that category. So now, once you've gotten to this point, this is what we're going to put into Blackboard. But we want to go one step further, and that is the development of descriptions in order to provide some feedback to your students. So these are a variety of different descriptions that I use. So one of the things, this is a writing course, and so students have to use appropriate formatting for their client letters. And so that was worth 2 points, and then so I simply put in some guidance here for the students. So that I said the letter does not meet the formatting, includes most of the necessary, includes all of the necessary formatting. I could also do it quantitatively. So this is question 4, which is having the students identify which states have a tax obligation in them. And so there are actually 4 states in this solution that are included in this answer. And so here I just simply said, okay, if they got all 4, it's 100% correct. If they got only 3, it's 75, 2, 1, and 0. So then I put in the percentage of the correct answer. Another variation of that may be that I might actually include the correct answer in the feedback that I'm providing to the student. Now, this would be something that you would need to think about. You would need to think about whether you wanted the answer, the actual answer, to be provided to your students. Because when we get into Blackboard, you're going to see that you will have the ability to show the students the rubric either before they begin the assignment or after they begin the assignment. So clearly, if you show it to them before, you only want to provide this type of description. You don't want to put the answer in. But a lot of times I provide the rubric only to them after they've completed the assignment and I've graded it. And so then I do choose to put in the specific answer to the question. Sometimes I also choose not to put the specific answer to the question in because I'm concerned about students using or sharing the answer with other semesters, and I want to reuse the assignment. So in that case, I may not choose to put in the exact answer to the solution. So that's what we do first. So we go through those very specific steps: creating your criteria, creating your level of achievement, figuring out the points that you want applied to each criteria, and then developing your description. So that's your foundation. Once you do that, you're now ready to create the rubric in Blackboard, and that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to go into Blackboard, and I'm going to show you how to create that rubric in Blackboard. I'm also going to talk you through the different settings that are available for student feedback. And then the great thing about Blackboard is that once you have a rubric created, you can copy it over to additional assignments, or you can even modify an existing rubric and change it and then use it for that new assignment. So those are what we're going to show you next. So let's go into Blackboard. I'm going to cancel out of PowerPoint. And we're going to move into Blackboard. So this is my Chicagoland case. I'm in Blackboard right here. And you can see that I have set up the project. I've got the company information here. I have 3 parts to this project. And I want to develop a rubric for this client letter here. So this is the assignment that you guys just saw. So we're going to go in. You'll notice I've already created the assignment. So I'm just going to go in and edit it because now I am ready to actually build the rubric. So here's my assignment view right here. I've got the assignment information listed here. I can set up a due date if I want to. And now I've put my points possible in here. And you'll notice right underneath that, that's where you go to create your rubric. So we're going to create a rubric from scratch. So we're going to click click on the Create New Rubric link here. So I'll click on that link. And then it will open up this area in Blackboard. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name the rubric. I always name it something so that I'll know exactly which assignment it's tied to. So this is my Chicagoland client letter. And so I'll put that in the title. Then down here, you'll see that this begins to look familiar to us. So now we have the levels of achievement across the top, and I have the criteria coming down on the left-hand side. So now I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint so I can follow along with my rubric that I've already created. So I want my first criteria to be formatting. Okay, that seems fine. I don't want it to be percentages though, so I'm going to go ahead and change it over here to points. Now notice you could do no points if you wanted to. You could do a point range if you wanted to. You could do a percent range if you wanted to. I'm just going to set it up so that it's based upon points. So I'm going to do that first level as formatting. I'm also going to change my levels of achievement. So I wanted to have 5 levels of achievement. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a column. So now I have 5 columns listed here. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to rename my columns. So the first column was does not meet, and so I'll just come in here. Then I'm going to rename this one. So this one is partially meets. And then we're going to have this middle one, which is meets. And then the 4th column, which is more than meets. And then need it to save. There we go, save. And then the last column, which is exceeds. I've got a screening issue here. Okay, great. Okay, so then after I do that, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I am going to set up my criteria on the other side, on this left-hand side. So let's do that next. So remember the first criteria was formatting, so that's fine. Now I want this next name to be, instead of organization, I want this next name to be spelling and grammar. So I'll just edit that, and I can go through and edit that as I want to. Now notice they only give me 3 options here initially. So if I want to add another option, I'll just come in here and click Add Row, and then I'll go and edit it. And let's just say this one I want to be question 1, and I want that to say total sales test. And I'll say save there. Okay, so now once you get all of your criteria set up, all of your levels of achievement set up, then you're ready to put in your points. So my points for does not meet will remain at 0, but for partially meets, I'm going to have it at 0.05. For meets, I'm going to have it at 1, and then 1.5, and then 2.0. And I would go through and I would do that all the way through my rubric to get it created so that it comes out to the full amount of points that I want. Now notice, remember, these points can be anything you designate them to be. So they don't have to be the same for all of my categories. So once I get my rubric created so that it matches with what we decided we wanted it to look like in our pre-build setup, then you would simply click Submit right here. Now I want to point out something to you. You can change the order of these items. So let's say that you decided, oh, you know, I really want formatting on the bottom of my list. So to do that, you're simply going to click the criteria button, and then there is a small a pop-up box that opens up, and you have to scroll down to the bottom of the page to get to it. If you can't find it, that's where it is. And then I can simply say, oh, I want formatting to go down a little further. And so you'll just hit reorder as you need, hit submit, and then it will be updated here. The same thing here for levels of achievement. You can go through and you can change the ordering, how you want that to be reordered. Now for the description. So remember, in my in the development of this, I wanted for the descriptions to look something like this, right? Did not answer, 25% correct, 50% correct, 75% correct. So I'm just simply going to put that in these boxes right here, which with each of the different points. So if they got 0 points if they did not answer, 25% correct, and then I could say answer is X, Y, and Z, and I could put that there. Those answers that the descriptions you provide in these description boxes are what provide that detailed feedback to your students. Okay, so once you get it all set up exactly like you want to, then you're going to hit submit. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit submit. And it's going to say, do you want the rubric to be 30 points? And I'm going to say yes here. If you do it correctly so that it matches, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes here. So now notice what's happened is now under the rubric area, I see that my rubric is now listed here. And let's go through and talk about what these different options mean. So the first one clearly is I can remove the rubric if I don't want it to be associated with this assignment anymore. I can also view the rubric, so that's that next button there. I can open up and click that button, and then it will take me into the view screen so that I can see what that rubric is going to look like. I can then, on this tab, I can go through and I can actually edit the rubric. So if I get it set up and then I decide I want to change it, I can click on this third tab and I can get back into that same screen that we were in where I can go through and edit and make changes. And then under type right here, I can use it for grading, which is the option that I always do, or you can use it for secondary evaluation, which would mean that you would assign a grade and then fill out the rubric just to provide some additional feedback for students. Now, the other part that's important is over here where it says show rubric to students. And so it defaults to no. You have a couple of options. So the first option is yes with rubric scores. That means if you say yes, that means that the student is going to see the rubric before they submit the assignment, before grading. So remember, if you have any solutions on your rubric, you don't want to say yes here because they're going to get the answers before they do the assignment. And the two differences between yes with rubric scores and yes without rubric scores is that one shows the point values for each of the different categories. That's the first option. The other one does not show the point values within the different categories. The one that I always select is I always select show rubric after grading. And I really like that option because then after I've graded the assignment, when the students go in to review their grade, they can open up the rubric and see exactly how I graded them along with the answers to that. So you can do it in a variety of different ways. You can either show them ahead of time the rubric that they're going to be used to be graded with, which is absolutely a great option. I tend to like to put the answers inside my rubrics, and so I wait to show the rubric until after their grading, which is why when I do the assignment, I'm very clear about what they need to include in the assignment so that they make sure that they get all of those items included. So now that we've done that, Then we just go through the process of finishing out the assignment. So I've got it all created here, and then I would click submit here, and then that assignment would be ready to use to grade using that graded rubric. So now I want to talk to you about, let's say that I didn't have that rubric in here anymore, but I knew that I had another client letter that I had graded previously in the semester, and I really liked that rubric, but I needed to modify it. So in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to come in to add rubric, and I'm going to go to create from existing. And when I select create from existing, then I can see that I have all my previous rubrics in here. And I can actually open them up and view them to decide if that's the one that I want to use. And now it's really simple because I can just say, oh, I'm going to use chapter 3 client letter as my base to begin with, and I'll hit submit. And then notice what it does is it provides a copy of the previous client letter. I can then rename it, but I have a place to get started with. And so I can actually go through and then modify the answers that I need for that particular assignment. So Blackboard makes it really easy to go through and create a rubric, to provide student feedback in the rubric after you get it graded. And then also, once you get your rubrics graded, to be able to reuse them for multiple assignments. So what I'm going to do to finish out our conversation today is I'm just going to show you how easy it is to use the rubrics when you're doing the grading. Now, because of FERPA, I am going to not show this live, so we're just going to look at some screenshots. But this is an assignment. This is a client letter for a different assignment. And I'm in the grading feature of Blackboard. So I see on the left-hand side, I see the student's letter. And then on the right-hand side is where I would typically put their score in. Right here, under attempt, is where I would put their score in. The first thing you need to do is you need to open up this blue box right here. So you would click that arrow right there to open up that box. When you open up that box, you're going to see the option of grade by rubric. And so that's going to allow you to actually grade the assignment by using that rubric that you created. So the next thing you'll do is you'll click on that rubric right there. By clicking on that rubric, it will open up the rubric on the right-hand side for you. Now, I do want to point out that if you click this small button over here to the right of the client letter, if you click that small button over here, then it will pop open a window. Instead of putting the rubric on the right-hand side, it actually pops open a new window. So you could actually put that window on a different screen and read the student letter on the left-hand side, and then the rubric would be on the right-hand screen on your secondary screen. So I like to just leave it in my same screen though, but what I need to do is I need to make sure that I click show descriptions and show feedback, because that's going to provide me with the descriptions that I wrote into the rubric, and also an area for me to type in some additional feedback. So now when I'm ready to start the grading process, all I'll simply do is I will simply click on which button, which level the student's letter is at, and then I can go through and I can type in some additional feedback in that feedback box. So when the student reviews the rubric, they're going to see the selection that they received for their level, and then they will also see the specific feedback provided specifically to them. Now notice also, sometimes I want to give them like half a credit or adjust their overall score, and I can totally do that here. So this was graded and it ended up being 11 out of 30. But let's say for whatever reason, I thought, well, you know, I really want to give the student another 2 points here, but it doesn't really fit in with the way the rubric is set up. So I can simply just come in here and say, change the number of points to 13 here. And then in the feedback, I could say something like 2 additional points awarded for creativity or something along those lines. And that's all it takes to get an assignment graded with the rubric. So after you do that, you simply click on Save Rubric, and then that brings you back to that page that you're very familiar with, where you have the grade listed here. The grade automatically populates into this box here. And then all I simply do is I just put a note in here for the students telling them to see the rubric for more detailed feedback. And so it has cut my grading time on writing assignments down significantly. I also do this for some of my tax return projects so that I know that I'm looking for specific things on the tax return. And so I'll create a rubric that allows me very quickly to just go check, 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 and have the tax return scored very, very quickly. So if you are teaching in a writing intensive course, you may find this being very, very true, that it always feels like you're never finished with grading. That by the time you finish grading the first 150 writing assignments, it seems like you're ready to start grading another 151 all over again. And so what I have found is that by using rubrics in my writing intensive courses, that it has significantly decreased the amount of time that I've spent on grading those writing assignments. So Jennifer, I'm going to pass it over to you. If you have any questions, please post your questions into the Q&A area. You'll see that in the screen, typically at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a box that says Q&A. And Jennifer, we're ready for you.
Thanks, Tracy. So we encourage you to follow our blog at www.accountingisanalytics.com. You can see how to sign up right there, and that way you'll be kept up to date with other webinars we're planning, and also some additional data analytics resources we'll be publishing over the summer. We have some upcoming online teaching webinars. So next week, we'll be talking about how to construct an exam in Canvas or Blackboard from 3 to 3:30 on Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time. And then on Thursday, May 21st from 3 to 3:30, we'll have another webinar on how to use Microsoft Teams in education. And again, you can find all of that information on our website. If you have any other questions, feel free to type it in the Q&A boxes. Our other webinars that we've done recently, the recordings are available also out on our websites under webinar recordings. So we have different ones listed here, but we've done several over the past month and a half. So please feel free to check those out if you're interested. And again, finally, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. And if you're interested in getting today's slides, then you can obtain those at http://tiny.cc/AIA-rubrics at our website once again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer and Wendy, for joining me today in this discussion